The evening sun cast long shadows over the fields as Samuel Reed wiped the sweat from his brow. The 56-year-old farmer had spent the entire day tending to his crops, his hands calloused from years of hard work. Life on his small farm in rural Kansas was never easy, but Samuel took pride in the land his family had worked for generations. As he made his way back to the farmhouse, something unusual caught his eye near the tree line at the edge of his property. A lone figure stumbled forward, barely able to keep his balance. Samuel's first instinct was caution. Strangers didn't often wander this far into the countryside. But as he stepped closer, he saw the man was in rough shape. His clothes were torn, his face smeared with dirt, and his eyes held the hollow look of exhaustion and desperation. "Hey there, son, you okay?" Samuel called out, approaching with measured steps. The man looked up, startled. He was young, mid-20s, maybe, and his posture, even in its weakened state, had a distinct military rigidity. Samuel knew that look. His own father had served in the Korean War, and he had spent years hearing stories of soldiers returning home, some broken in ways no one could see. The young man swallowed hard, swaying slightly. I don't know where I am," he murmured. Samuel stepped forward, steadying him before he collapsed. "You're on my farm. Let's get you inside." The soldier hesitated, clearly wary, but his body gave him no choice. Samuel guided him into the house, settling him on the worn-out couch by the fireplace. An hour later, after a hot meal and some water, the young soldier's hands stopped trembling. His name was Private Jack Dawson, and he had just returned from overseas. His unit had been deployed for months, and the transition back to civilian life had been harder than he expected. Somewhere along the way, he had lost his bearings, both physically and mentally. "I got off the bus a few towns over," Jack explained, his voice rough with fatigue. "I was supposed to meet a buddy, but I don't know. Something inside me just couldn't handle it. I started walking. I didn't even know where I was going." Samuel nodded, understanding more than he let on. He'd seen it before, young men returning from war, burdened by invisible wounds. "Well, you're safe now," Samuel said. "Stay the night. We'll figure things out in the morning." Jack hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, sir." Over the next few days, Jack helped around the farm in return for Samuel's kindness. He mended fences, fed the animals, and worked the fields. The physical labor seemed to help him, grounding him in a way that words never could. Samuel watched as the young soldier's shoulders straightened, the weight on his spirit lifting just a little. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Samuel finally spoke. "You know, Jack, pain doesn't just disappear. But neither does kindness. You've got people out there who care about you. It's time to go home." Jack swallowed hard. "I don't know if I have a home anymore." Samuel studied him for a long moment before reaching into his pocket and pulling out an old, folded letter. "My father wrote this to me before he passed. He told me that no matter how lost a man feels, there's always a way back." Jack unfolded the letter carefully. The words were simple but powerful. A man is never truly lost if he still has a place where kindness exists. Jack's hands trembled as he held the paper. His voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you." The next morning, he left, promising to reach out once he figured things out. Samuel watched him disappear down the dirt road, hoping that wherever Jack went next, he would find his way. Days later, just as the sun was setting over the golden fields, a distant rumble shook the earth. Samuel looked up, his breath catching as 3 military helicopters approached, their powerful rotors kicking up clouds of dust as they landed in the open field. Before he could react, uniformed soldiers stepped out. And then, Jack emerged. This time, he wasn't lost. He was standing tall, his uniform crisp, his eyes steady. "Mr. Reed," Jack called out over the sound of the blades, his voice filled with something new, purpose. Samuel walked forward as Jack extended his hand. But instead of just a handshake, Jack pulled him into a firm embrace. "You saved me," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I wanted you to know, I'm going back. I re-enlisted. But this time, I'm ready. And I wanted to thank you, sir, before I go." Samuel blinked back, the emotion rising in his throat. "You don't owe me thanks, son. Just do me a favor, when you find another lost soul out there, show them the same kindness." Jack nodded solemnly. "I will." As the helicopters lifted off, Samuel stood watching, the wind from the blades whipping around him. A single tear slipped down his weathered cheek, not of sorrow, but of hope. Because kindness, no matter how small, had the power to change a life. And sometimes, it could even bring a lost soldier home.